Dan, you're back.
Yep, I have returned and I will be around for the foreseeable future.
Darn.
All right, what are we talking about?
The importance of trust when working with a financial planner, the value of focus and client experience, and precious metals investing.
Welcome to the Science of Wealth, where we discuss the science behind financial planning and the art of learning and applying it. Okay, importance of trust, client experience, and a out of left field precious metal investing question. Well, hit me here. What is the question of trust here?
Well, I don't know. I've been thinking about it lately, and in our line of work, we have a pretty unique situation where we meet people, and almost immediately, within the first few meetings at the very least, they need to trust us with their personal financial information. They often link accounts. We can see statements, in addition to talking about a lot of personal things like what they want as they age, their family, etc. That's kind of a big ask of people.
Yeah, I mean, we have to gather quite a bit of data just to do basic competent advice. I think one of the most challenging things we do as financial planners is get asked for quick soundbite advice, like what should I invest in? It's like, dude, I have no idea what you should invest in.
I had a conversation like that about a week ago, and they said, "Can you just take a look at one of these small accounts I have that I like to play with and see if I've picked good stocks?" And I said, "There's absolutely no way I can do that, but I appreciate your asking, I guess."
And not to go off on too much of a tangent about that specific example, but I mean, the basic thing here would be like, hey, I have random ingredients for this recipe. Are they good, high quality ingredients? And you could like see, like, oh, it's like butter and flour, but like, is it the best butter? Is it the best flour? Right? Was it the most appropriately priced? This idea that you're just going to be able to glance at a couple of tickers and just know magically, like, this is a good portfolio or a bad portfolio, completely unreasonable, particularly because these companies and investment vehicles, ETFs, mutual funds, whatever, change constantly. So even though you get very familiar with a lot of them, it's impossible to look at them, on the fly and actually give a true professional opinion.
Yeah, it's definitely a question I'm getting more and more often that's harder and harder to kind of give a succinct answer. That's like, no, we can't talk about that really.
Welcome to being a financial planner in which your advice is free and worth nothing.
Exactly. They know you do it professionally, they value your opinion, but they sometimes don't want to pay for the whole package.
It's true. So trust wise, I mean, as far as the element of clients needing to trust us or place trust in us, be a little bit more specific here. What is the curiosity or the ask in the domain of client trust?
Well, I think a lot of people, they just have a checklist in their brain. And one of the things they're like, well, I should hire a financial planner. I should talk to one and make sure I'm in a good place. Great. And they don't think any further than that in the beginning. And they schedule a meeting with us and they come in. And then occasionally people seem a little bit surprised when I say, okay, well, here's kind of a list of things that we would need to see from you before I can see, give you a good idea of where you're at. And it is a big ask, but they didn't seem to expect it. Over and over again, I find people being surprised about how much they have to trust us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that largely stems from the fact that most people engage a financial planner not because they woke up and thought, I don't have a comprehensive financial plan for the rest of my life and that's what I need. They tend to have a particular problem. They have, the proceeds of a home sale and they've got money left over and they know that they should do something with it, but they don't know what to do with it. Or they just got married or they just got divorced and they're trying to figure out, what finances look like going forward. Or they realized I want to retire in the next couple of years, but I'm not sure if that's actually going to work. And I need somebody to answer that part for me. And so when you ask for something like their home and auto policy, they're like, well, man, I just needed help investing my money. Like, what does my home and auto policy have to do with that? So I get that, but in the same sense, to utilize an analogy here, I think for a lot of people, the desire to ask about one specific part of their financial plan and to get help with one particular part of their plan is sort of akin to going to somebody and saying, "Hey, I don't want a map or a GPS or anything to tell me exactly where I am, but if you could tell me either my exact longitude or my exact latitude or my exact altitude, or if you could tell me whether I'm on the east side or the west side of this particular hill or mountain, that's all I really need. When you, as a financial planner, to torture this analogy, know that they do probably need a more comprehensive map to figure out where they are, and more importantly, to figure out the path to where they're trying to get to.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy, actually. And I don't know, I think it's something that we need to remember as financial planners, if there's any others listening, is we kind of get into the habit of asking for this information. To us, it's our everyday, it's not a big deal. I'm like, here's the portal, link your accounts, I'll take a look. It's a big ask, and we forget on our end that it's a big ask sometimes, or at least I
Yeah.
can.
Well, and it's a big ask depending on whether somebody was already organized or not. And the funny thing is, a lot of people who do go through the data gathering process do come back and say, like, wow, I had so much more stuff going on than I thought I did. Or, I'm really just relieved already. I haven't even hired you yet, but I'm just so relieved to like have gotten it all together, to have it all in one place. I've never done that before. There was an old kind of commercial posted or published that was available to financial advisors through the eMoney software platform, and it used the analogy of like gathering possessions throughout your entire life, and kind of use a visual like a messy room, like for a child, or like a pile of toys, and then sort of described the financial planning data gathering process as putting all your stuff in a box, getting organized in that sense. And the visual there is a little bit strange, but I found, particularly as people get older, as their lives get more complex, there is usually a pretty long breadcrumb trail back through their working history of old retirement plans, old benefits, little accounts they opened here or there. They had a cousin who worked for an insurance company once. They bought a policy to help them out. And, they got interested in day trading 10 years ago, and then they kind of burned out on it. And they've just got this little account with a bunch of random stocks. Like, it's very normal for people to not have a really good grasp on their financial picture. And so on some level, it can be shocking for somebody to ask for our help, in getting organized, which is not what they're asking us to do, but that's suddenly what they're being asked to do, to realize not only did I only think I was going to be talking about investments or only be talking about my insurance needs or whatever it was, but also I now suddenly undergo a bit of stress and anxiety because I realize I'm pretty disorganized, or not as organized as I thought. And that kind of puts me in a strange, stressed position as this stranger, right? Somebody I've spent 30 minutes with so far is suddenly asking me to tell them everything about my financial position.
Sure. And I think I've definitely encountered clients that seem to feel a little bit of embarrassment about it, which they shouldn't. But, like the breadcrumb trail of accounts or something, they'll be kind of self-deprecating. They're like, I know I should have rolled them over the years and I just didn't. Or, I know my budgeting isn't that great. I'm kind of embarrassed to show you. And I think maybe they forget it's pretty common. We see it a lot. And there's really no reason to be embarrassed. We all have things that we maybe should have done and didn't do.
Mm-hmm. And I think on some level, because money is such a taboo subject, right? It's considered rude to just like ask people, "Hey, how much do you make?" or like, "How much money do you have?" People aren't used to discussing money in the first place, but people should know, particularly those people who are listening, it is the exception, not the rule, that people have their stuff pretty well organized to begin with. It is very uncommon that people actually have a good fix on their financial picture, because most of us deal with our finances in abstractions. Just, can I afford my bills, my payments? Am I saving? Am I saving enough as a arbitrary percentage that I feel is meaningful, or that my employer incentivizes through a match? Do I have homeowners insurance? Do I have auto insurance? Not do I have enough? Not would it protect me? And so those abstractions make it a little bit complex. The irony is also, financial planners and financial advisors, and I like to bifurcate those into different terms, but broadly speaking, financial advice professionals do not enjoy a great reputation, because so many people who call themselves financial advisors or call themselves financial planners are just salespeople. And so, the advice that's often given to people is, hey, be cautious, be careful. A lot of these people out here are just going to try to take advantage of you or try to sell you a product, whether you need it or not. And that leads people to be mistrusting sort of at the outset, or cautious at the outset. And consequently, that then means it takes them more time to trust. The irony is, if you've gone to a good financial planner, one that is genuinely a real financial planner who's going to do a good job for you as a fiduciary and so on, then the faster you can trust them, the better off you'll be. The problem is you just don't know that you can trust them. Trust does take that time to develop.
It certainly does. And I think transparency is important on our part. I was talking to my partner the other day, actually, and to touch back on what you said about a minute ago about how taboo it is for people to talk about how much money they make or what they have. he was incredibly surprised to find out that, like, I know how much you have in your accounts. I can see it. You're completely open about it, as well as, mine is available for Daniel, for example. He can see what I have in my accounts. How much money I make is public record. You've posted it before on your blog, I think more than once. And he said, "Doesn't that bother you? That's amazing how much money you make." And I was like, "No, it's out there. If people are expected to share their information with me, I think they should be able to see mine. And I am fine with that." And to him, that was just completely, he was like, "I would never do that. At my job, they have to negotiate for their salaries, and it's a big secret, and no one talks about it." And I won't get into compensation because that's a whole nother topic, but like how we get compensated from clients. But I think it's very important for planners to be open and transparent. And I really like that we are here. I think it helps a little bit with that trust relationship with our clients. At least I hope so.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree because otherwise I wouldn't encourage that we do it. I mean, for anybody who has never been to the office, if you're not aware, there's a display case in the office that has all the most recent statements from all of my accounts in it. The account number is covered because nobody needs that, but my balances, my holdings that I contributed money and so on is all on display. We're also in the process of doing a voluntary financial disclosure, even on our employee profiles on the website, to say here's how much I make, here's how much I've saved, etc. And everybody gets to opt into that and share what they would like to share in that context. But the idea there is, again, we're going to ask every person who comes through our doors to share their full financial picture with us. And by extension, it makes a lot of sense for us to be just as transparent with them because that does help build trust.
Certainly, which I think kind of transitions into my next topic here is, the client experience. In addition to trust going both ways, I think that's a very important thing that people occasionally overlook. They get a little bit too interested in the business aspects of things and how transactional it can be without thinking about maybe the softer points of client experience.
Yeah. Client experience is something that I spend a lot of mental energy on. And the irony is, a lot of best practices, guidance in the financial planning world sort of glosses over client experience in the sense that it often focuses on efficiency. How many clients can you serve? How little time can you spend on them? And there are definitely things like automations where there's a perfectly happy balance between spending less time and still delivering value. But when I think about client experience, I do think about that sort of front to back, right? When somebody opens the door to our office, what do they see? What do they hear? What do they smell? When we greet them, when we meet them, what is the conversation we're having at the threshold? And as they're invited back to have this conversation with us, again, what are they seeing, smelling, hearing, and experiencing? I think it's a very meaningful part of the experience because there's this old piece of wisdom. People won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And in that particular context, I think of a lot of the experiences I've had, both good and bad, with assorted vendors, hotels, restaurants, airplanes, and so on. And I do remember, I don't remember the color of my hotel room or exactly what somebody said when I got to a resort in Mexico and they handed me champagne, but I remember the champagne. So there's something to be said for being mindful in any business about really what do people physically and emotionally experience beyond the literal value of the thing you deliver to them.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I know recently I had a negative experience with a car salesman, and I remember every detail of that, but I don't remember, which cars we test drove in the lot and things like that. But I remember him and how he made me feel and whether or not I would go back and ever work with him. And, similar experiences at restaurants and other businesses. I'll remember that, but I really don't remember if it was like the best burger I've ever had or the third best burger. That didn't really stick with me, but I remember the server and, how they acted.
And in that particular example, right, we think about the car salesman or the restaurant or those sorts of things. And this circles back to the trust topic a little bit. A lot of people feel insecure coming to a financial planner. And one of the most core pieces of being their advisor, of being their planner, of asking them to trust us and engage with us, is that we are asking them to be vulnerable with us. And the worst thing we could possibly do is make them feel bad for making themselves vulnerable. We have to build trust. We have to build rapport and a relationship with our clients by hearing them where they are, seeing them where they are, and supporting them where they are on the path to where they want to get to. You hear an analogy out there sometimes about, it would make no sense to shame a fat person for going to the gym. because that's the absolute place they should be. And yet the world is full of stories of being, overweight or out of shape and going to a gym and having people there sort of sneer at them or be rude to them because they weren't already fit. As financial planners, we deal with people who would, in the athletics analogy, range from Olympians to absolute amateurs. And in that particular context, they might be incredible at something else that they do, right? They might be the smartest engineer on earth. They might be the best teacher on earth, or they might be the most clever entrepreneur, or the hardest working tradesman on earth. It doesn't really matter in that context because they've come to us to be experts in financial planning for them, and we want them to have a strong experience in that same way. And that does feed back into the trust. My favorite example to pick on for sort of bad client experience consistently, but still having a high degree of trust, are doctors, right? Doctors are rated amongst some of the most trustworthy professionals amongst all professions. And yet, most people, when you ask them to break down their medical experiences, don't have a lot of good things to say about it, right? I got to the office, I checked in, they made me wait for 20 minutes, then they took me back to an exam room, and I stood on a scale and they took my blood pressure, and then they made me sit on the weird bench with the piece of paper, and then I sat there for another 30 minutes, and then the doctor came in and said, sorry, I'm late, and then I spent 5 minutes with them and they sent me on my way. And yet we still place an enormous amount of trust in those professionals despite the lack of a quality experience they have. Now, there are some doctors and some medical practices that really do emphasize client experience, or in this case, patient experience, by having less patients or by having larger appointment slots so they're less rushed and they can spend more time with you and so on. And that certainly improves the quality of the experience. But just imagine the experience you have with any vendor, with any business, with any place that you interact with, and really think about it from a step-by-step level and decide how much of an influence your experience has on your willingness to do business with that entity, with that group, or with that professional. Sometimes it matters a lot, sometimes it matters a little, but it's a really meaningful thing to contemplate, not only in why do you work with who you work with or do business with who you do business with, but in turn, what are they doing to support the quality of that relationship?
Certainly. I think, like in our first meetings with a new person that I've never met before that maybe booked online or something, I spend a good portion of time listening to them say, I'm a little embarrassed. I should have, organized all sooner earlier in life. And me having to say, that's fine. It's good that you're here. It's not a bad thing. We're happy you're here and you're doing it. And just reassuring them and making them feel welcome and comfortable, and making sure they view us as a professional, as people maybe do to a doctor, like you mentioned.
And that part is just so powerful because I think ultimately, if we can't build trust with our clients or with our potential clients, then we do them a disservice, not because they don't hire us, but because they may not go talk to another planner, right? If the experience is poor enough, and maybe we aren't a fit, maybe we're not the right service model or the right cost for them or whatever the reason is, but if we don't build enough trust with them to at least feel comfortable to talk to whether us as a professional or another professional, then a person may continue to languish in a poor financial position or be exposed to unknown financial risks for an intolerable amount of time until something truly bad does happen to them. So I do view the duty of both building trust and building a positive client experience as one that extends just beyond the boundaries of the office, beyond the actual conversations we have, to the impact on their overall well-being.
I think that's a really good point. One bad experience can really throw people off overall, not just in, our immediate relationship. And I think an example of that, I'm going to do a slightly awkward segue into my third point, but someone I was talking to recently, her husband had passed away so recently, et cetera. So she's kind of trying to get interested in the whole money world, just all of it, because she wasn't super involved in managing it all. And she's gathered information from a variety of sources, including podcasts she finds and friends and anything online. And she's very interested in precious metals investing. And I've definitely, from what I've gathered talking to her, she's not getting it all from like consistent sources. She's getting really conflicting information. And I find that that's really common when it comes to precious metals. But I guess I'm not actually even sure why. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Precious metals investing obviously enjoys a very long history because you can go back to ancient currencies that were made out of precious metals, and even essentially up to Bretton Woods here in the kind of middle of the 20th century, we had a gold standard currency, and so gold and silver and even copper and other things like that have always enjoyed a reputation as repositories of value. And that makes them appealing because we instinctively understand like gold is valuable, silver is valuable. We understand that just implicitly. Whereas when you say something like, a fractional 180 millionth share of ownership of Apple is valuable, and people are like, yeah, I like my iPhone, but I don't really quite feel the same level, just intrinsic value from that tiny, tiny fractional share of ownership of a business that I do from tangible precious metals or real estate or anything like that. Precious metal investing tends to be marketed by a couple of groups and tends to appeal to a couple of groups in particular. It tends to be marketed by the literal kind of manufacturers, so the mining companies or the kind of smelting companies that turn them into bars or coins or that sort of thing. Obviously, they've produced a product, and now they're very interested in selling the product. But I do think precious metals are a good example of that old expression, right? People don't buy the ticket; they buy the destination. People don't buy gold or silver because they value the gold or silver. They value the sense of security that that physical asset provides for them, right? They can hold it in their hand, they know it's valuable, and they can just feel a little bit safer with it. And so it's marketed that way. You see enormous, enormous amounts of advertising around, how to easily invest in precious metals, gold, silver, coin companies, bullion companies. You can buy gold bars at Costco. There's a whole variety of ways that this gets sold, but it's a investment that advertises itself. The thing I think that's interesting is you don't see people advertising Apple stock or Microsoft stock, right? You see people advertising the companies, their products, the value and goods they provide, but nobody is out there just running ads for you to go buy more Apple stock. And so, in that same context, the preference for precious metals comes from a sense of insecurity or fear or uncertainty, and it's heavily, heavily marketed to in that sense.
Do you find that people like that who are being targeted for the security aspect then have a difficult time maybe accepting? Because I know there's ETFs and things that mirror the gold and silver and everything that they could be invested in that's easier to buy and sell, and you don't have to physically store it the way you do a gold bar. There's certainly pros to doing it that way. Do you get a lot of pushback on that from those people?
Yes and no, because the honest truth, right, there's plenty of ETFs that charge something like 10, 15, 20 basis points, meaning, 0.1 to 0.2% of the value of the entire amount. And all they do is just buy gold or buy silver. And then when somebody wants to redeem it, they sell the gold or sell the silver and return the value to their investors. And that removes all the tangible security concerns, right? If you put gold or silver in a safe in your house, it's only as secure as your safe and only secure as your house, and then potentially only as secure as your ability to produce violence on somebody who attempts to take it from you. Whereas in the tangible gold silver ETF, you have professional management companies with professional security providing that for you, and you're paying a very nominal fractional cost of the value of the asset to provide that. And in turn, you also have a much more liquid and efficient market through something like ETFs. Like there's a big market for gold and silver, but typically speaking, every time you buy gold or silver coins or bullion, and anytime you want to sell gold or silver coins or bullion, you're going to be paying several percent in transaction costs getting in and several percent in transaction costs going out. Compare that to paying, 0.1% a year. It might take you 20, 30, 40 years to incur enough of a rolling cost on the value of the assets compared to the one-time transaction to get in costs and the one-time transactions to get out costs. Some of the arguments for tangible metals and precious metals and like actually having the gold, silver, whatever in your home is that it is going to be really valuable if society collapses. This is where you get into the joke that the most valuable asset is probably going to be something like guns, ammo, seeds, and water, right? Not precious metal. Because if I have a gun and you have gold coins, congratulations, I now have gold coins and a gun, and you have nothing. But in that same extension, that sort of gets into the weird prepper murder fantasy land, which I'm not a big fan of. I think that's a silly place for us to go, even though societies collapse and disasters happen and so on. But I think the least precious thing you're going to have in a scenario like that is the heavy metal that you have to now protect and secure and carry around with you and hope that people will trade you for it for their more survivable materials or possessions. So when we come back then to just a pure non-apocalypse scenario analysis, then I think the gold silver argument becomes rather silly because realistically, these tangible assets in any commodity for that matter, not even just gold silver, we could look at wheat, coffee, lumber, whatever it is. All of those are really only valuable for one particular thing, and it's a hedge against hyperinflation. which is to say, hey, if the US dollar suddenly becomes a lot less valuable for some reason, as we've seen currencies in other countries become a lot less valuable, then I could still take my gold, silver, or coffee beans and sell them to somebody in, let's say, Britain for pounds or euros that presumably in this scenario have not also hyperinflated. So all that to say, gold doesn't produce any value on its own. It's not innovative. It doesn't invent anything. It doesn't have sales. It doesn't do anything on its own. Same thing with silver. Same thing with coffee, wheat, and all the other commodities. They're useful for certain things. In the case of precious metals, jewelry, some technological components, decorations, those sorts of things. In case of lumber, coffee beans, whatever, right? We drink coffee, we build houses, and so on. But otherwise, the idea that these, just physical assets are going to produce returns they're going to preserve value is pretty silly, because their face value increases or decreases with the demand for the actual asset and the necessity for it in technology or in the production of other goods. And otherwise, functionally, they really only serve that hyperinflation hedge, which is a real risk, but in the United States, historically has not really ever come to pass, could come to pass in the future. But the question is, how badly do you want to hedge your portfolio against an apocalypse at the expense of losing real money to inflation and the opportunity costs of just investing in a more broadly diverse portfolio, instead of listening to kind of our human anxieties and fears and over concentrating in an asset that doesn't do much?
Well, you've convinced me not to install a safe for now, at least.
Hey, there's plenty of value to safe, so I'm just not sure that anybody needs to go out and spend a lot of money on a safe just so they can then spend a lot of money on pieces of metal, just so they can then worry about whether those pieces of metal are safe and secure inside their home at all times, all for the purpose of producing a better financial outcome, when you could, with much lower stress, buy the gold, silver ETFs or something like that and get the same financial outcome. And you could just buy any stock market or bond market or money market, ETF, mutual fund, whatever, and probably get a stronger financial result over the long term.
All right. Well, I'll retain that for the next time someone asks me about it.
And hey, I mean, if somebody wants to give away their gold and silver, I'm not going to fight them on that. But on the other side of that, I just don't know that it makes a great deal of sense to invest in heavily. Can you make money in these assets? Certainly, of course you can. It's not to say that they're worthless or anything like that. It's just that their utility as an investment is pretty limited. But that said, you have asked me your 3 questions, brought up your 3 topics. So you know what I'm going to ask. What have you learned since the last time you were on the podcast that you'd like to share with the audience?
Since last time I was on it, or since last time I was on it with you? Because you've been gone.
Whichever involves a more interesting takeaway.
Well, I've been doing a lot of stuff out in the community, but also doing a little bit of data review here at the office. So it's been a little bit more of a mix than I think it was last time you asked me that question. You've been gone. We've been working in your absence. I've definitely enjoyed, I obviously won't name names or get personal, but looking at certain people's documents and seeing how to word it succinctly, but what they've done over their entire life is really interesting, and it tells a lot about the person. I think it's important. This is going to be a little bit niche and just for other planners, but to really take a look at the specifics of what people are uploading and showing you and what that says about them. You can learn a lot about that and then save time in meetings and not have to ask possibly redundant questions, which you actually already have the answers to if you sit down and read everything over and are thorough.
Shockingly, if you do the research, you will learn things.
Who would have thought?
The Science of Wealth is produced by My Wealth Planners, a registered investment advisor in Colorado. The theme song is This Is Your Time by Dan Phillips. The podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not investment advice or any other form of advice. Not all material discussed on the podcast is appropriate for every individual in every circumstance, so you should consult with a certified financial planner, tax professional, or legal professional as appropriate before attempting to apply any of the subjects, strategies, or tactics discussed on the podcast.